Well, good morning and welcome to the Merrimack, New Hampshire Trustees of Trust Funds meeting for June 17th, 2022. I'm Chris Christensen. To my right is,
Bill Wilkes, trustee.
to my left,
Pat Heinrich, trustee.
and
Tom Boland, Finance Director for the town.
thank you all very much. The next item is to welcome Liz Petrides, who is not here today, but she's now been approved and sworn in as our alternate. Her term starts July 1st.
Excellent.
So we're pleased to have that occurrence after many months of delays.
And I would point out that because she was approved, both Liz and I went to the New Hampshire Municipal Association Trust Fund training a couple of weeks ago.
Good.
Nice.
So,
I've been a few times and Chris has been several times.
And just as an aside, I had trouble with Hoover, their software, last time. So I wrote them a note and said, if you're going to do it this way again, is it going to be recorded and can I just watch the recording, which they hadn't done in the past.
they did record it, and it was Hoover, and it was not my cup of tea. I liked the Zoom meeting. The week before, I went to the Right to Know training,
Yeah.
and that was on Zoom. This one was on Hoover, and I didn't care for it. And I so told them when I would,
Well, good.
but I
Good.
will have some comments about that under record disposal.
Okay. In any event, it is available, and we can go back and look at it or do the selected items that you want to do. One other item on the agenda, it slipped through, it should have been on here, but this is the month that we do elections. So I'm going to bring that up under item number 9, which is other business that may properly come before the trustees. Next item is minutes of April 14th, which was the high school library visit. Do we have a motion?
I motion we accept the minutes from April 14th related to the visit to the high school to assess the library
Okay.
status.
I'll be glad to second it, but I would like to make a comment. The meeting was posted for 9:30, and the minutes show that it started at 9:15. And I was a little upset when I got there at 9:20, and the meeting had already started. But we started it early.
I think we started it early. It wasn't on purpose. It was just because we were holding people up, the principal and others. And, I feel like their time is precious. And, I think,
I was just surprised that
Yeah.
I came in and it
Yeah,
was
I
in
didn't get a
progress.
direct RSVP from you that you were coming, so. Tom let me know, he said, I talked to Pat, she says she's coming, but I didn't have an email directly from you, so we didn't have an official word on that, so that's the deal. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. 300. Minutes of May 20th.
I'll make a motion that we approve those.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The motion carries 300.
So you want us to RSVP to these meetings that are posted to you so that you won't start early?
So we'll know who's coming, yeah.
Okay, because, I didn't RSVP to today's meeting, and yet we waited, and we were all sitting here.
Well, because it's scheduled for TV. The other one was off-site, we had no.
But it was still scheduled and posted.
Okay. The item says presentation and discussion with Cambridge Trust. They're not actually coming today, but this is a little bit of a follow-up to the things that we discussed with their presentation last month. So I have a couple of things. I've been back and forth with them a little bit after that meeting. Allocation of fees, particularly on the common funds. And we had originally instructed them to split the fees 50-50 from common income and common principal. But there's like $5 million in the principal account, $3 million in the income account. So splitting them 50-50 created a bookkeeping nightmare, to say the least, that was not compatible with their new software system that they're using. So I mentioned to them that I think our intent was to split the fees proportionally, so that the common income fund would pay its fees and the principal fund would pay its fees. And the same thing with all of the other accounts involved. And that seems to work for everybody, and I think that was our original intent. If you think there's something different, then we should discuss it. Otherwise, I think we need a motion so I can write them a letter of intent, or letter of instruction to do it proportionally.
I have two things to say on that. First of all, one of the things they said at the trustee training is that you can take advisor fees from the principal.
Yep.
Which I was concerned about, as you know, and they
Yep.
concurred that, yes, that can happen. But I don't understand how taking 50% of the fees and proportionally putting it through the principal and 50% of the fees proportionally through the income, I don't understand how that's difficult. Because isn't that what we said we wanted?
Well, if you're gonna do it proportionally,
No.
you have to do it on a ratio basis. So if it's 30-70, you take the total amount of fees and allocate 30% to the one that represented 30% of the gross amount of dollars.
Right, but then that wouldn't be 50-50.
Exactly.
And that's where the confusion came, that if you try to split the total fee 50-50, then it's overweighting principal.
You're
Because that's
penalizing one,
60% of the portfolio.
you're
I'm sorry.
penalizing one that doesn't represent the same
Okay,
amount
so-
of gross dollars.
So how do we make it so it's equal? Or is there no way to make it equal? Because I thought 50-50 would be equal and that we would.
No, I don't think we want it to be equal, we want it to be proportional. If you have an account that has $3 million in it, it should pay, pick a number, $300 in fees. And if you have a $5 million account, it then pays $500 in fees. But making them cross-support each other is not really an accurate representation of what should be happening.
The bottom line is the fee should be, if the fee is 10 cents per dollar or whatever, that's too much. If it's a penny per dollar, it should be a penny per dollar for each of those when they're separated out, not a penny and a half for one and 0.8 cents for the other.
So that means that more is going to come out of the principal rather than the income.
Yes, in
Yep,
dollar, in a
because
dollar
it's-
value,
Because it's a larger account.
yeah.
Same thing with the capital reserve funds. If you have $1 million capital reserve fund, it pays X number of dollars in fees, and if you have one that's $200,000, it pays its fair share. And it earns its fair share. Remember, the earnings are proportional as well.
Why would we have a problem with this? I'm losing you guys.
I don't have a problem with it.
I mean, it sounds pretty logical to me.
I just think more is coming out of the principal, and that's
Because
what
it's
I'm worried
larger.
about. Yeah, I know it's larger, but I'm worried about that, but.
Why are you worried about it? I mean, we have to pay them, look at it as in the aggregate. I mean, if you add them both together, we pay them a certain amount of money. If you look at them individually, whatever's taken out and you add that together and it's the same as the amount that's paid in the aggregate, it's a pretty good check and balance.
I'm just concerned with losing principal, but at the same time, it's more income that can be spent by the entity that's spending the income this way. So how do you fix it? What is it
We'll
you
just
have
write
to
them a
do?
letter that says, do it proportionally.
Okay.
If somebody
On
wants
the
to-
total amount of the account,
For
which
each
is what
account,
you're
yes.
saying, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Is that acceptable to everybody? You want to make a motion, or just by consensus?
I will motion that fees be allocated proportionally for the common fund income and
Well,
principal,
I think it should be for all accounts.
or for all accounts.
Yeah,
Okay, Okay.
Yeah.
Is that a second, Pat?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Do you have any thoughts, Tom, before I call for the vote?
No.
Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, 3-0-0. And the investment policy review. I gave you each copies, right?
Yep.
So this is the, in fact, it's actually the signed copy of what we approved a year ago, August. And it is our legal requirement to review and approve every year. So we do it when we file the annual reports that are due September 1st. So I'm going to just ask for comments or discussion if there are anything that you think needs to be done differently.
Well, you're probably not surprised, but yeah, I do have comments, and this is my first shot at this particular policy. But under capital reserve funds, I would like for you to include that the trustees have capital reserve funds under their supervision from the town of Merrimack, the Merrimack School District, the Merrimack Village District, and the Merrimack Public Library.
I'm unaware of any capital reserve funds from the library.
Thank you. That's what I missed. Yes, you are. Library roof construction.
That's a town capital
That's-
reserve fund because the building is owned and maintained by the town.
No, the building is owned by the library trustees. The land is owned by, and the library trustees set it up, and the library trustees are the agents to expend.
But they don't put the money in. It's tax dollars that go into that fund.
It's still the library's capital reserve fund, and that's how it's listed.
Any thoughts on how you account for it, Tom?
That's a good question, actually.
We account for it as all the other funds that the town maintains.
You guys have the copies. I did not make a copy of the 10 pages following the memo. So if you want to take a look at that and see what page and what other things are listed on the same page as the library, maybe that'll clarify.
I don't think it's on here.
What are we looking for?
The library, where it's grouped with the other capital reserve funds. You have some for DPW, some for highway, some for whatever. And so they're all kind of grouped in your spreadsheets.
What would be interesting to look at is to see the warrant article, because I believe the warrant article grouped it may be that the library was grouped in with the warrant article. But it's the libraries that are the agents to expend. Whether it's tax dollars or not, it's the library that was an agent to expend.
Okay, we don't have any control over that anyway.
No, but that's the warrant article that sets it up.
Okay. Next, anything else you want to discuss, Pat?
Well, I wondered, in your non-expensable, under permanent funds, you have 3119, 3120, 3121. I wondered why 3131, which is school, isn't in here, if you're going to list all the statutes. And you should also list 202A22, which is the library trust funds.
Which page are you on?
2. These funds shall be called common funds, and the library funds are in the common funds, as are, there aren't any water district ones, but there are town and school.
I don't have any objection to that. The RSA's apply whether we list it here or not. It's
Yes,
probably a
that's
good
true.
thing. Can't hurt to put them in.
202A22. And the school one is 3131.
Anything else?
I wondered again, and this is from the training, that the training, they talked about investing by prudent man or prudent investor.
Mhm.
And I wondered if that was something you wanted to. I'm sorry. I thought this was shut off. I apologize. I'm at a meeting. But I didn't know why, they kept talking about prudent man and prudent investor, and I
Yeah,
was
we-
surprised
we
not to see
operate
that
under
in here.
prudent investor.
And I was surprised not to see that in here. As-
prudent management under investment strategy.
Okay, I hear you, but they refer to it as prudent man or prudent investor, and it's just only because I just come from the training.
Okay.
But I also had a question that it shall be invested with emphasis not on maintaining principal, but on income, which surprised me, but that's my worry, is that principal is gonna be maintained, and as opposed to an emphasis on, income. And that's just a comment I wanted to make.
Well, I'll go back to the comment that Eric made last month, that our income strategy has done us well
Yes, it has.
this year compared to the economy in general. If you look at the market value of almost any portfolio around the country, it's way down, but our income is consistent.
Well, there's no
So-
question they've done a good job. Which brings me to the next comment, which I was surprised in the investment policy that you didn't cover that the fees will be paid by. Maybe we don't need to put it in policy, but is that something we should put in since we just talked about it?
I
And those
don't-
were the only comments I had.
I don't know one way or the other. It's never been,
Yeah.
this has been in effect for
Yes, I know, for
many
several years.
with minor changes.
Right.
I don't know that it's
It needs the
necessary.
fees to be a separate memo.
Yeah, because
This
if we,
is an
if,
investment policy, this
Yeah.
doesn't really pertain to fees charged.
and if
Right,
we
and I
ch-
can,
if we
I can argue
changed-
it that way too, that,
Yeah, if
yeah,
we changed banks, for example, or advisors,
okay,
the fees might change. And we wouldn't want to have to rewrite the investment policy because we signed a different contract. Or if they came to us and said, fees have to change because the price of diesel's gone up. So I don't think it's necessary
okay.
in the
no.
investment policy.
Well, that just led into the discussion we had earlier, so
Yep.
that's it.
All right, I'm okay with those changes. Are you okay, Bill?
Yes.
All right, let's do this. Would you send me an email so I have the exact wording you want? I agree with it.
Which ones? Just I think it was just the RSAs.
If you want to add the library in, I think that's harmless.
Okay.
I don't,
And it doesn't matter to me whether it's prudent man or prudent management, but it was only because all of these people kept talking about prudent man versus prudent investor.
I'll put it in the email.
That's
Okay.
not a real progressive way to put it, man.
Well, that's the
Sort of
title
a
that-
joke, but sort of the truth, right?
Well, that's the title
There you
that they used with it, and I gather there's statutes that refer to prudent man or prudent investor from what they were saying as they went through, so I was just like,
Yeah.
then, and prudent investor that's what we're doing, that's the terminology that they're using, but prudent management works with me, I was just surprised. and
Yeah, I
Only
think
because I just,
prudent man applies back in 1900 when the only opportunities were putting it in a passbook account.
yes.
In any event, if you want to send me an email, I will
Okay.
redraft this, and then we'll have a hard copy that we can vote on in August
Thank you,
and sign in August.
yes.
Is that yield goal of 2.5% to 3% still appropriate?
I think so.
Are you thinking it might be, we could get higher?
That was my thought. Certainly,
No, no, I
certainly
think we-
wasn't lower, but
I think it could be higher, potentially.
Well, if you look at the chart that we had last month, we're just a squeak over 3.
right.
And we all know that we could get 4, 4.5, 5. If we put it all in Rio Tinto, we can get 8. But obviously, we don't think that's a prudent thing to do. And certainly Cambridge Trust doesn't think it's a prudent thing to do. So I think we're okay with that. We have been nudging them a little bit, and I think they've done a good come around over the last year or two to go in that direction.
Chris, I wouldn't have a problem changing that to 2.5 to 3.5. I mean, that would,
Okay.
because you're saying we're over 3%,
Yep.
and we'd be outside the bounds today based on the policy, so I don't think it's dangerous or reckless to have that be 3.5.
Okay. Do you want to go to 3 3/4 or 4? Can't hurt.
I mean, we
there's
have the
no upper limit.
we have the lower end set.
Yep.
Yeah.
So all we're doing is putting a range in there. And if we're outside the range by their, well, I mean, to Tom's point, if they deploy cash now, they're probably gonna have a lot easier chance to get more than they could get 6 months ago.
Yep.
So it's gonna drive the yields up inherently. I don't know what the number is, but I think maybe we should have it something more than 3%.
Well, let's go to 4. You want to add that to the memo, Pat?
Okay, 4, yeah. That
Yeah.
makes, I was gonna say 4 too, because
No,
it's a goal.
The 10-year this morning is 3.4.
It's getting a lot easier to get between 3 and 4%.
Well, part of what's going to affect our portfolio, and this is going to take a while, is as interest rates on bonds go up. I think there'll be a little bit of a lag in the dividends, and we'll probably find ourselves heading a little bit more into bonds or other fixed income types of assets, but I don't think we're ready for that yet.
Well, the prudent companies, so to speak, are gonna be careful with dividends with a potential recession coming on, so that they don't, increase their dividends to a level where their payout ratio is too high and reckless, so.
Exactly.
I don't think companies are gonna raise their dividends as much as they might have done when things were going a lot stronger.
Yeah, no question about that.
And we have a lot of, blue chip companies. I'm sure they're gonna be careful, which is a good thing for us,
Right.
but I don't think we're gonna see the increases in dividends like we had. But if they have dividends and they reinvest that cash, inherently they're gonna get a higher yield on the reinvested cash. It's it's not a huge amount of money proportionally, but it's still gonna drive our overall yield up over time. Unless the
So-
stocks.
I don't disagree with you, but I think it's further out in time than what we're gonna be doing. The thought process, however, is that we have I don't remember what it is, a cap or a goal on fixed income proportion. And I'm wondering if we should adjust that. Well, no, it's 50% now. So there's plenty of room to work there.
So I guess Pat will send an email regarding 4%.
4%, okay.
All right. Anything else we want to do?
Does that low end of 2.5% make sense? Would you guys be happy if your portfolio yielded 2.5% over the next year? Seemed like it was about 2.5%, and we were unhappy and directed Cambridge Trust to make some changes to try and get us over the 3. So I'm just questioning whether 3 to 4% makes more sense than 2.5, but not a huge issue one way or the other.
Well, the pundits think we're going to wait and see if we're going into recession. My opinion is we're in it now. We just won't get the pundits to say so for another 2 quarters.
Jim Kramer said it started 6 months ago.
Oh, there's your good authority. I love Jim Kramer. He's funny. The possibility is that if recession is significant, then dividends may be reduced, and then we put ourselves in a bind if we move the goal too high, and so I'm a little reluctant to go there right now.
I would, and I don't think this needs a motion, but I would propose that we leave the 2.5% as is, but I would propose that we explicitly send something to Cambridge Trust, just maybe a memo showing them what we changed in the investment
Yeah.
policy, which will highlight that we've moved it to 4%, and I think they're very conscious of our desire to move yields up prudently.
If I can, just for a minute, it dawns on me that the reason for my confusion on emphasis on maintaining principal as opposed to income is that this is two paragraphs, one paragraph on principal, and when we're talking the 2.5 to 4%, that's on the principal, or at least that's where it's listed.
Mhm.
There aren't any goals under the income. It's a whole separate paragraph, and there's no goals under there. Is there a reason this needs to be separated?
Well, I think they're separated because when we established the two separate accounts,
And yet, there's a line in the goal of the fund's fixed income component is, and I guess I'm fixed income,
That's all one and the same. Fixed, yeah, I think.
so, because
I think the difference is when we establish these two separate accounts, the income account
right,
was treated a little bit differently because they can play around with capital gains.
right,
And if you put a cap on that of 4%, and they bought Amazon at 800, then we've blown our goal because they made a huge amount of money. And over the last, pick a number, 10 years, capital gains, just by sitting with if you put everything into an S&P 500 ETF, you're making 20%. We certainly don't want to cap that.
well, I'm not gonna claim to be an expert on this, but just the two paragraphs was where I was thinking that I wanted the principles, and there's no 2.5 to 4% in the income one, and you have
Doesn't it-
different benchmarks, which is the 80% of the, whatever, and,
Doesn't it say the current investment objective is to meet or exceed the long-term rate of inflation under income as measured by the CPI? Which that's a pretty ambitious goal at the
the
current.
objective is to meet or exceed the long-term rate of inflation as measured by CPI. That's under
That's the
income.
long-term, though. Let's not get the short-term situation.
The common fund
I don't think we should
income
confuse
shall-
those two.
Shall be invested on a total return basis. The specific objective is, it's just something to look at, and as I said, it confused me. This
Okay.
is my first shot at it, and I'm looking for advice and suggestions, because I was confused.
I mean, you
I'm
could-
okay with it the way it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't have a problem necessarily, but it would be pretty simple to add another bullet that just basically says the same thing. That the goal for dividend income should be between, or investment income should be, well, how would we say that? Because I know
That's
what you,
why I think
Yeah,
it's
so
better-
that's, and
I
there
know
is
what you
already
just
a
said
goal.
about capital gains, but we
Yeah.
don't buy like an Amazon.
Right,
But-
All right.
but I use that as an example.
But-
because it's-
You know, if you bought an ETF, like healthcare ETF has paid huge capital gain dividends. And that's a good example of what Chris is talking
Okay.
about. A lot of the ETFs pay pretty big capital gain distributions,
Okay.
which would skew that.
Yeah, I think we'll just leave that one as is.
Okay, that's fine. I just, that's why I was asking those questions, and that's why, so, that's
Okay.
fine. Thank you.
All right, so we've got, I think, 4 points there. If you want to just send me that memo, then I'll put that language into a new hard copy.
Okay,
Correspondence. We got a bill from the Merrimack Flower Shop. We've paid it $118.50.
okay,
We approved 150, so we
Not to
did
exceed.
okay there.
Yeah.
yep. that's
$118.50 is the same price they've charged us for the last several years. Okay, Capital Reserve Fund from the town, reimbursement. The request is for $1,950,490.66. You all have copies of that memo and the spreadsheets related to it. Do you want to say anything on that, Tom?
No, I mean, it came in pretty much what we were targeting it at. It's similar to the requests we've made the last several years. Nothing out of the ordinary.
I think even though we received via email the backup material, you're welcome to go through it. Historically, we've looked at it and said, well, the auditors are going to go through this in much more detail than we ever could. So we kind of rely on the auditors to pay attention to that, and it all balances out when they do their work. So I'm not worried about the backup too much. But it's always interesting to look at. And I remember one little thing, I was flipping through the insurance reimbursement thing and said, oh, we're reimbursing these people $450 for damage to their car from a pothole. But the most we really should have reimbursed them was $250 because they should have gotten the rest out of their collision insurance. And I think they started taking that kind of thing into consideration. We don't get a lot of requests for the liability funds anymore. It's done on a multi-year aggregate, so it's working out, I think. So it does make sense to flip through those things and just, every once in a while, something's gonna flare up and look at you, but other than that, I think the reliance on the auditors is the past practice. Anybody want to say anything about any of that?
You
Okay.
need a motion?
We need a motion to approve the $1,950,490.66.
I make a motion, we approve the reimbursement
And
to
I'll
the town
second.
for the capital reserve fund from the capital reserve fund of $1,950,490.66.
I love the
it's-
60
I
cents.
think it's actually 60 cents.
It's 60. Yeah, I
Sorry?
love the 60 cents, and I think it needs to say funds with an S, but that's okay.
Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
300, I vote aye. We received a check from the Merrimack Village District, which has been deposited, $236,923.00. And we received Capital Reserve Fund planning from MVD, which is pretty much the same stuff that we've known before. So I forwarded that on to Cambridge Trust just for their planning purposes, but I don't think there's anything that's, they're not gonna be doing anything with it until fall anyway, maybe August. They can't do anything from our point of view in July, so
Right.
nothing exciting there, but just need to notice that we received it.
Did the school district send the request for the money for the gym?
No.
I've been on his case about that. Okay, because,
The money sits in our account and
yeah,
earns interest.
I'm just wondering about closing out the fiscal year for him, because I know that's what they're trying to do.
They don't seem to be worried about it.
They always have extra money somehow.
I've sent them,
Well, I know they always have extra money.
yeah, I've sent them a
But
couple
this
of
year, they
requests.
have a warrant article that allows them to hang on to some of their extra money instead of turning it over, so there's a little extra stress that they're going into. Okay, well, he told me he was trying to get it in before the end of the year to you when I talked to him.
Well, I don't have anything,
Okay,
so it'll come up in August.
all righty.
All right, Pat, you said you had something under records disposal?
Several things under record disposal, and the first of which goes back to the training. One of the things Terry Knowles had to say at the training is that RSA 202-22, you're not gonna wanna hear this. The statute says that the entire income from trusts that the trust fund are managing shall be paid over to the library trustees as the same is received. And Terry said, no invoice is needed.
Okay,
So we are supposed to be giving them 100% of the money every year.
Yep.
It says, as the same is received, you can work out an arrangement that we will, and they suggested annually. Like July 1st, you'll give them the income. But we're supposed to be paying them that money annually. And they don't have to ask for it. The statute makes it our responsibility to give it to them.
okay, and they in the past have said, we want you to keep the money
I
and
know.
invest it for us, so. We're holding it in the sense that,
Yeah, well, they have the ability to invest, and they do have a fund that they are investing, so however they invest it is theirs. I was, yeah, but I thought that was rather interesting. And no invoice was needed. However, as far as record retention goes, I have been having a lot of fun, because one of the things that record retention says is that we are supposed to keep annual reports permanently, and we are supposed to, after 6 years after, bank statements. So what is our annual report? And this is the thing from Cambridge Trust. And is this a bank statement?
yes,
So these we have going back probably 25 years.
Yep.
And I pulled them out of the files, and that's going to get it. But I think I propose that we hang on to these as bank statements, and we will keep 6 years' worth in a drawer, actually 7 years' worth.
Annual, not 12 months.
No, bank statements. They say bank statements.
I know, but we've been getting those monthly.
Right, and they say bank statements. I had wondered whether, and I think somebody was considering in past, Chris, maybe that these were, the June 30 of this was a annual report, all of these pages. And that's one of the
It
questions
isn't-
I tried to get answered.
that's a monthly report.
That is a monthly report. It doesn't say annual report on it.
They send a separate one that's the annual summary.
And Tom and I were talking about the fact that the report that's in the town annual report, which lists all of, and says it's an annual report, that's something that we ought to, maybe we should be considering that. I asked him to talk to DRA to find out what DRA considers an annual report. And I think we're gonna find what's bound in the town report book is gonna do it. So we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a little spacey sometimes, because when you talk to the charitable trust division and say, what are we supposed to put in the annual report? Well, there aren't any guidelines. You can put in this, you can put in a summary, you can put in something that says refer to the website. And if you go through various towns, online type stuff, there's just a total mishmash.
actually, they provided something in the annual report that each year that the legislative, where is it here? Eeny, meeny, miny. What you're giving to the auditor is a list of all the securities and so forth, but you're supposed to do an annual report. And the interesting thing about the annual report is it's supposed to list the names of all donors and donations you get. And one of the things that they told us is that there's legislation on the governor's desk which may be signed to keep the donor's name private and not publish it.
Well,
But
Either
knowing-
way, all of that is encompassed in the New Hampshire trustee portal. And those are the annual reports that are generated, so.
But we are supposed to keep a copy
and-
permanently, and I'm not finding copies. The legislative body may authorize the printing of reports of the trustees in a summary form rather than full detail in the annual town report. And I think
Right,
that's what we've been
we do,
doing.
Yeah,
So that's where the annual report is, and certainly, but if somebody were to call Tom and ask to see, or call you and ask to see a copy of the annual report, it would be interesting chasing it around. Also, I will tell you that I wanted to be sure we had minutes, and Diane looked back in the vault, and she thinks she may or may not have 2019 minutes because of how she binds things together, but she has nothing prior to 2011.
well, they're all on the website.
That doesn't count as the permanent record of that the town clerk has. But I thought that was interesting, because
Well-
so it becomes a question of, do we keep a copy of the minutes in a book in the files? So that people don't have to go chasing around for
There's no
them.
requirement to keep them on paper. The minutes are on the website, and when we've done the annual report, because we don't do hard copies, they've printed something off of the website and handed it to Diane. And what she does with it after that, I
In
don't know.
order to, the website doesn't count as maintaining permanently. They have to be kept either paper,
Right.
and it
so
is
we print-
statute,
So we
or-
print
and
it off the website.
the
We
minutes.
give it to Diane, and then after that, it's up to her.
Well, she doesn't have anything prior to
Well, I
2011.
can't help that.
Well, that's just sort of interesting, but I didn't know if maybe there was some out there. I have been finding, and I was curious from you all as I'm going through things, there is nothing on Vera Christensen in the files, and we need the paperwork. There is nothing on Dr. Quimby, is it?
Yep.
From the library. We need the paperwork from them, so I'll be reaching out to the library to get those copies, because we
I
should
can-
have them in the files,
We have those, I can give them to you.
please,
They're
so
just-
we could put them in the
they're
files.
electronically preserved.
I found it absolutely fascinating things about, as I'm going through the various records, but Master Cola left $1 to each of his children
Yeah. and
in
they
the
send
will.
it- and
I
they
thought that was hysterical, and they
and-
went back to the court, and they
They
got more
took it to
money out
court
of it.
and They got a little bit more, but mostly it went to the town.
Yeah,
or the school
mostly,
district.
and, yeah, and the piece of property that they bought, I mean, it's fascinating when you're going through all of those things. But I'm still not finding any place where we have to name things on that site, because I don't think that's the Mastrocola Farm site, at least according to the map that's in there, but it's fascinating as you're going through them.
The original Master Cola site was down by the river.
Yes, and they talked about the piece of property and where it was, but I know the school district names everything over there as Mastrocola, Mastrocola. But I thought it was part of the will, and it isn't. So there's some interesting things there, but, that I'm finding. I'm also finding the vouchers contain all of the backup. And part of me would like to keep the vouchers going forward, but actually the statute says we don't have to. But these are going back 50, 60 years, some of them. So I haven't thrown anything out. Actually, I did, because I found a doctor's receipt for you in the file. Yes,
Okay?
it's been shredded. But other than that, I haven't thrown anything out at the moment. I wanted to be sure that we all agreed. But all of these, I mean, this is in the files going back 20 years. And I'd like to get rid of, and just keep 12 years worth, or 6 years worth. And then in July 1st, you can go over and throw out the last one, and
Well, I don't think you need to keep the monthly reports. We have the annuals, which should be in there as well. Although Tom may keep them separately, I don't know.
well, the statute specifically says bank statements that they're talking about, so it seems like we have to keep bank statements. And since they send them monthly, although didn't we just decide we didn't want this?
We're supposed to be working on it to get them
Right, so
either
they'll be
quarterly
less.
or just an
Yeah.
online reference.
Yeah, so with any luck, that they'll cut down. but it's been as I'm going through some of the things I'm finding are,
We could probably argue that they're not bank statements, they're brokerage statements.
and that's what that was the question I was trying to get asked, and Hoover, I couldn't get it through Hoover, is a brokerage statement, and it just never came up for them to answer the question, and,
Yeah, and the statutes are
yep,
way out of date relative to record keeping, so.
yeah, and the person writing the LSRs doesn't do a terrific job about cross-referencing some things, so it was an
We need
interesting.
a 30-year-old to write the new statute. It would be a lot different.
I remember, pardon me for reminiscing, I
Oh.
remember somebody in a committee meeting saying, well, you know, we can't do this because the law says this. And I said, well, wait a minute, we're here to change the law. Let's just, you know, what do you want to do? And they couldn't grasp that concept of
It was.
the legislature's there to bring things up to date.
And for laughs and giggles, they are revising the MS-10 and the MS-9. But they're still, yeah, I thought you would like that. They're not sure when they're going to have it done, but they kept talking about it.
Well, they've been talking about that ever since the first one came out.
Right, so they're still working on how to and what, and so, stay tuned is all they told us. They're throwing things around, so stay tuned.
All right, thank you, Pat. Next meeting, no meeting in July, August 19th, at which point we will be approving the annual reports as well as the revised
Okay,
investment policy. And September 16th, is that acceptable to everybody?
It works for me at this point.
yeah, I think so.
Okay. And I promised you this under item number 9, other business, that we are supposed to do elections in June. I'm willing to continue if you guys
So moved.
are good with that. All in favor?
Aye.
300.
Question.
Yeah, can I have a raise?
No, does it make sense to have a separate secretary? Because you've been doing secretarial and chair duties.
Actually, I think he's secretary and treasurer by the statute.
Well, in various places, it says elect a secretary, someplace else it says elect a bookkeeper.
Yeah,
And I think just use the word chairman. I put secretary treasurer on the letterhead because that's what used to be there. When I took over from Dave Johnson, he said, well, call yourself secretary treasurer because you're writing letters to corporations about this and that and the other thing. They like to see treasurer or secretary or both, or, you know. We don't do that anymore, and it just kind of hung on, so. I think from the stuff we do now, it's easier to say chairman, but
So I was thinking, as chair, you're the chairperson, chairman, whatever, but does it make sense to have a separate secretary?
well, if Pat wants to take and produce minutes, I'm okay with that. Or if you want to, that's okay with me.
I don't want to,
You
but I
guys
think
I don't want to either. I already do it
Pat-
for 3 other things.
Pat does a good
Okay.
job and
All right.
seems to find little small things that are important for record keeping.
All right, well,
It's, I can do it if you want, but as you say, I already do it for 3 other boards.
all right, well, we'll leave it as is for now.
Yeah, but I was gonna say, I think the statute says elect a secretary, elect a treasurer, not a chair for trustees, as I remember.
Well, we'll call it a combined office.
Yeah, I mean, that's why,
There being no further business, we are adjourned at 9:50.
okay. Thank you.